U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made his first visit to the Philippines, meeting with President Bongbong Marcos at Malacanang earlier today. During the courtesy call, Marcos said that Hegseth's visit sends a strong message of the two nations' commitment to work together and maintain peace in the Indo-Pacific region. Meanwhile, Hegseth reaffirmed the United States' ironclad commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty and vowed support for the Philippines' stand in the West Philippine Sea amid tensions with China.
I had a chance to speak just a few minutes ago to our president. President Trump thinks very fondly of this great country. He and I both want to express the ironclad commitment we have to the Mutual Defense Treaty and to the partnership. Economically, militarily, friends need to stand shoulder to shoulder to deter conflict. Whether you call it the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, we recognize that your country has stand very firm in that location and in defense of your nation.
So now let's try to understand more deeply the visit of U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's visit. We have geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian with us tonight. Welcome to the big story. You are still at The Hague?
Actually, I'm now in Brussels. So I headed to Brussels right after The Hague para kausapin yung mga contacts natin at the European Parliament and the European Commission, not to mention yung embahada natin. Shoutout sa Philippine Embassy folks for accommodating us dahil ang konteksto ng discussion natin dito is where does our relationship with Europe go? Europe and ASEAN, Europe and Philippines go. Dahil dito sa Europe, nagpa-panic mode na sila. They're really worrying about the direction of the relationship with the United States. The same gentleman, Secretary Hegseth, was just here the other month and openly saying na, together with Vice President J.D. Vance, basically saying na tapos na yung era ng special relationship between Europe and the United States, and that the Europeans have to take care of their own needs. So
yes, but he
the question
showing
is it
the U.S. Defense Secretary saying ironclad ang commitment nila sa Pilipinas. Do you believe that, or sa tingin mo may ibang pakahulugan yun?
No, I mean, this term na ironclad has been used throughout the decades. No, Obama used that also back in 2014. I'm not very interested in the metaphor or the lexicon. Ang mahalaga sa akin is what Secretary Marco Rubio said earlier this year. I think number 3 tayo dun sa mga tinawag niya ng mga counterparts, si Secretary Manalo, where he said na yung ating Mutual Defense Treaty will apply to any attacks, no? Sa ating mga whether sandataan lakas, sa ating mga public vessels, public aircrafts, and of course yung ating mga sundalo dyan sa Ayungin Shoal. So as far as the US is concerned, both the Trump 1 and Trump 2 administrations, consistent sila na yung Mutual Defense Treaty ay directly applicable dito sa West Philippine Sea dispute. So it's not just a tone, no? Operationally speaking, also we see the second Trump administration so far much more reassuring to us than they have been to the core Europeans here in Brussels.
Right.
What about the tone? I don't know if you caught, Richard, the joint press conference of the two Secretaries of Defense, our Gibo Teodoro, and the United States Hegseth. Medyo spicy kasi yung words ni Secretary Gibo. He kept calling Xi Jinping, Communist China, like that.
Yeah.
Oh, what did you make of it? Was there a subtle difference or imagination ko lang yun?
Baka pwede na mag-apply as Fox News anchor na rin si Gibo. I mean, I think he got the same kind of I won't say kutzpah. He got the same kind of personality because as we know, of course, Pete Hegseth, you could see that the anchor in him still comes out, no, the way he talks about things. Andun pa rin yung energy niya, no, yung Fox News anchor. Maybe infectious yung ganyan energy, positive energy, hyper energy ng mga Fox News anchor. But generally, I think I'd rather have our foreign secretary make definitive statements when it comes to how we want to approach China. I'm no fan of China. I was actually supposed to be China this week for a Boao Forum as a VIP, but I was advised probably better not to go for reasons that you can decipher yourself. So I'm glad to be here in Europe. I feel safe and good here. And of course, I covered also the ICC issue. Now, let me also add, speaking of ICC, it's quite interesting that just the other month, Trump administration sanctioned the International Criminal Court because of their disagreements on the warrant of arrest against their key allies, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. matagal na may problema ang US with the ICC. Pero kung pansin nyo, quiet ang US dito sa warrant of arrest and the arrest eventually of President Duterte and bringing him here to Europe to face justice at The Hague. So that just tells you that at so many levels, my common understanding na tayo with the United States, even as the Trump administration tries to withdraw from a rules-based international order and its traditional alliances in other places like Europe.
But Richard, just going back to the visit of U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, how do you think China will respond to the growing cooperation between the United States and the Philippines?
Well, sa pagkaalam ko, si Marco Rubio is also heading to the Philippines soon. So we are very special, right? So Mike Waltz, their new national security advisor, met Secretary Guibo, I think 24 hours or 48 hours into his tenure earlier this year. As I said, number 3 or number 4 yata si Secretary Manalo sa mga tinawag ni Marco Rubio. And then now Pete Hegseth here, Marco Rubio also coming soon. So actually, medyo may pagka first in line tayo. Medyo may strategic empathy. And let's be clear, the Americans have been pressuring the Europeans to spend 3, 4, 5% of their GDP on defense. They're saying the same on the Japanese. They're saying that Taiwan is 10%. But you never hear the Americans saying the Filipinos should spend X, Y, and Z on their defense. Because naintindihan nila yung sitwasyon natin, yung limitasyon natin, at na-appreciate nila na despite our limited capabilities, dun sa transparency initiative natin, dun sa AFP modernization natin, we are doing our part. So parang ang bait nila sa atin. I mean, so far. I mean, just the tenure, the cadence, sobrang mabait and understanding sila sa atin. So, I don't know. I won't be surprised if more Filipinos would love Trump.
Yeah, kanina kasi meron siyang sinabi na si Hegseth, almost like binash niya si Biden na parang, nag-promise siya sa inyo, pero di naman niya binigay lahat ng money. Parang may ganun siyang sinabi. Nagulat ka ba doon, Richard? What did you make of that? Does that mean we can actually...
I mean, bashing Biden is also what they did during that very notorious meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine. No? Basically, ang position nila is yung mga katulad natin ng mga frontline allies sa Asia na napakamahalaga, pinabayaan tayo ng mga dating administration. I would say that applies more to Obama and the other Democratic administration, all the way to even Richard Nixon in the 1970s, the Republican president back then. But in fairness, Biden, Trump 1, Trump 2.0, consistent naman sila in terms of their operational support, in terms of the legal parameters of their support. So naintindihan ko, for their domestic audience, it's always nice to bash their rivals, the Democrats. But as far as we are concerned, I'm more than happy to see them consistent dun sa kanilang support sa atin. Speaking of which, $5.3 billion, I think, or $5.1 billion defense aid package will most likely push through under the Trump administration. This will be one of the biggest defense packages that the U.S. will give here sa ating rehiyon sa Asia. So that tells you how much the Americans value this relationship because they see our geography. We're next to Taiwan. We're fighting it in the West Philippine Sea, and we're embracing the Western Pacific.
This comes at a price, and it's also about time, nasa Europe ka, Richard, that we also, fund our own defense. I mean, kahit nakatiting, magpakita naman tayo na meron tayong sariling kakayahan, hindi ba?
Absolutely, absolutely. So basically, yung sinasabi ko dito is, we may not be in the same lake, we may not be in the same boat, but we're in the same lake. In a sense that yung mga Europeans, medyo mas malala yung problema nila with the US, almost ideological, no? Pagdating naman sa atin sa Pilipinas, I think we have a lot of common understanding. But at the end of the day, tama naman sinabi ni Ambassador Romualdez, maybe Trump 2.0 will not be that bad. But what's clear is that maraming mga isolationists in the US, including some officials like Andrew Byers, the one who in charge sa Pentagon sa Southeast Asia and South Asia, who said na dapat at some point siguro China and US should cut a deal about the West Philippine Sea and withdrawing EDCA bases. So there are going to be isolationist voices in the US. Maybe now it's the Hegseth and Rubios and Waltz who are pro-Philippines or helping the Philippines will be having that influence. But we never know. We really never know. We never know under Trump 2.0. We never know what's going to happen in the future. Kaya mahalaga that we strengthen our relationship with Europe. We're negotiating a reciprocal access agreement with the French, similar to the one we have with the Japanese. Yung mga Espanyol, mga British, mga Aleman, all of them are offering all sorts of different defense deals with us. Gusto na tayo, biglang nasa good books na tayo dito sa Europe. I used to come here during Duterte's time, my goodness. Medyo stressful nung time na yan, discussing issues that, of course, you can imagine what we're discussing. But now I feel good as a Filipino talking to officials here in Europe. We are in the good books. They have a lot of respect for what we're doing, and they respect us as a middle power, as a rising dynamic economy. So a lot is also coming in our relationship with Europe, including a free trade agreement and hopefully lots of good investments.
But finally, Richard, and if you can give your answer in a short soundbite. You just came from The Hague. So anong assessment mo sa nangyayari sa ICC? VP Sara cautioned their followers not to harass the ICC.
Well, actually, bumisita ako dun sa detention center at nag-group hate kami ng mga followers ni President Duterte. Some of them, they were trying to taunt me. You can imagine what was the context. But hawk ko silang lahat. There's a footage of that. But more importantly, I think dapat sober ang position ng mga Duterte side because base sa mga nakausap ko ng mga insiders, experts, among others, they believe that medyo game over na yan as far as the legal issue is concerned. Okay. The preponderance of evidence is very, very heavy. And in fact, may chismis pa nga, baka hindi daw tatagal yung kasalukuyan nilang abogado who actually has a record of abandoning or allegedly abandoning some of his clients in the past. Let's see what's going to happen. But mukhang as far as Digong is concerned, there's a very high probability he'll be spending the rest of his years dyan sa Hague, which is not necessarily the worst place on earth. And he's going to get due process, the same thing that was denied to victims of alleged extrajudicial killings.
Well, we thank you again for your insights. Richard Heydarian now in Brussels. Thank you.